All right, let's take a look at React routing, right? React routing. So by routing, what we mean is that we would like to be able to navigate or implement the functionality of navigation, and that we already have that, right? The browser already implements this mechanism, but it implements it in using hyperlinks, right? Where you have one hyperlink that refers to another document, and the behavior is that when you click on this hyperlink, it unloads the current document that it's loaded, and then it replaces it with the content of some other document. Yes, right? And but since we are using single page application, this just won't do, right? We never want to leave the current document that we just loaded, the index.html. It took us a lot of effort to render it, right? We went to the service, database access, yada yada yada. We dynamically rendered it. We don't want to throw it away, right? So what we want the same mechanism of being able to navigate from one page to the next, but without having to throw away the entire document, right? So routing is going to allow us to dynamically fetch content. Yes, we still want to go fetch new content and whatnot, different pages, different portions, different sections of the application, but without unloading the entire document. We just want to instead replace the current content with this new content, but keep the same index.html, right? And we would like to be able to even swap between the contents dynamically and say, okay, I'm looking at page A, then page B, and then go back to page A, right? But I want to be able to cache them as opposed to having to go back to the server and fetch for all this content. I can cache all this on the client. Yes? So routing, right, is a mechanism by which we can achieve this, right? And it's the same mechanism or the same concepts regardless of which framework you use, whether it's React or Angular or Vue. They all use the same concept, right, of routing. Okay. So routing. So to give an example on how routing works, here we have a hello world content, and we're going to create a couple of different pages, right? A couple of different pages, and we're going to start navigating between the pages, right? So to do this, the routing mechanism, the routing library, is not part of React, right? There's actually quite a few routing libraries out there, of which one of the most popular one is called Browser Router, right? The React Router DOM. I'm sorry, it's called the React Router DOM, right? And this library doesn't come by default. Is not part of the React library when you install React. Okay, this needs to be installed separately. All right. So let's do that. Let's install the React Router DOM library. Let's see. This is still running. I'm going to stop this for a second, and let's make sure we're in the right place. And so let's install. We said npm install, and it's the React Router DOM. So React Router DOM. Save. Don't forget to save. Otherwise, it'll work locally, but it won't work. It won't work when you push it to Heroku. All right. So let's do that. So it's going to go out to the npm repository, and it's going to download that library, and it's going to add it as a dependency to our project. Once it downloads it, it's going to copy the library to node_modules, and then we can just import it from within our React pages. Okay. The full documentation, if you want to read the library, how it works, you can search for React Router DOM. This is the the npm entry point into npmjs.com. It says how many folks are using it. 2.2 million downloads this week, and it shows some documentation on how to use it, and how do you include it if you're using just plain old JavaScript, and it has also the repository where you can go fetch it, how to install it using npm. This is exactly what we did. The license, and somewhere here there should have been a link to a website. Where? home page. Okay, here we go. Right, this is the home page where the Git repository is, and also documentation on how to use it. All right. So I encourage you to read through the documentation. We're just going to start using it, right, and learn as we go. All right. Okay. All right. So now that we installed it, let's take a look at how do we use it. All right. So to use it, right, we're going to import the router. Okay? And from the library React Router down, which we just installed. Now this router exports a whole bunch of different things. Right? In particular, we care about three things. Right? We care about a router, we care about a route, and we care about a link. Right? The link is what you expect. Right? A link is something that's going to behave just like a hyperlink. Okay? But it's going to have some special features. One of the things is that it's not going to behave the way default. It's not going to have the default behavior of hyperlinks. The default behavior of a hyperlink is to leave the current page and go to another page. We don't want to do that. We want to stay in the same page. All right? We want to somehow notify some framework. Right? We're going to notify that somebody clicked this hyperlink. Right? And then somebody's going to have to handle that and do something about it. But certainly not throw away the page and load it with something else. Yes? So that's what the link is going to do. All right? Then the route is going to have the responsibility of saying, well, depending on which link you clicked, I am going to display different things. If you clicked on this link, I will show this content. If you clicked on this other link, I'm going to call that other content. Make sense? All right? And finally, the router is kind of like the parent of this whole thing. Right? It's the root library, right, or the root container that provides all this behavior, right, to routers and links and whatnot. Okay? All right. So let's take a look at this. First, we load the browser router, right? And the as here allows me to rename the whatever we are importing. We can give it a local name and use it instead of the real name, right? The reason we are using this naming like this is that notice the name here. It says browser router, right? It used to be that there was only one router, right? But so these folks wanted to be able to also participate or in the not only in the routing mechanisms for browsers, they also wanted to participate in browsing mechanisms for mobile, right, or native applications. Yes, they too need some routing mechanism. Yes, so the new version of this library distinguishes between two routers, right? One that is used for the DOM, for the browser, yes, right, and they aptly named it the browser router, okay, and then they have the native router as well. We're not going to touch the browser router until we're not going to touch the native router way until the end of the semester when we talk about React Native, right? We'll revisit that then. Now we're only just going to focus on browser router. Everybody okay? All right. Also, because of before the change in the version, there was only just one router. It was just called router. All right. A lot of the code that you see out there that documents all this uses router everywhere, right? So that documentation is still valid, right? One easy way is to just call the browser router just a router, and now the documentation just works, right? Because everywhere in the documentation is router everywhere. Make sense? So that documentation is still valid. Here we're just they always say, okay, well just call it router, right? And then if you want to read some documentation, go ahead and now it'll make sense. Otherwise, it would explain, oh yeah, we used to call it router, now it's called browser router. This is easier. Make sense? All right, excellent. So let's do this. Let's apply this idea here in our example. Here we have the whiteboard, in the whiteboard, we're going to do a routing here, right? We have a course editor. We have a couple of course cards, right? What we'd like to be able to do is be able to maybe navigate between various pages. Yes. So let's do that. Let's import the browser router from the React router DOM. Let's import that. Okay, there it is. Okay, and what we're going to do in our whiteboard is that we're going to create a route. We're going to say we're going to declare a route as the parent element of our entire page, our entire what are you router? Sorry, router. There we go. Right, and in here we're going to have a whole bunch of links, a whole bunch of routes, and we're going to and then depending on which link you click, we're going to display one thing or we'll display another thing. You know, in particular, the assignment has at least 3 routes, right? It has the course grid, it has a course list, and then you can toggle between them, right? And either show the course list or the course grid, yes? And if you click on a particular course, now you want to display the course editor. So there's at least 3 routes, right? Either the course grid, the course list, or the course editor. Yes? Right? All right, so let's do that. Let's see. Did we create the course list? I forget. Okay, we don't have a course list. So let's right now we only have just a course editor. Let's just implement a really trivial course list. So course list .js, and this will be a just a let's see. We're going to import React from React, and this will be just a simple function. So const course list is going to be a function that takes no arguments right now, and it's just going to render h1 course list. Okay, all right, and I'm going to do the same thing for the course grid. Copy, paste, and this will be course grid, right? And the course grid, it'll have just a course grid. Grid, and this is grid. There we go. Oh, I forget, right? All this needs to be exported. And this will be export course grid. There we go. In the default package, default. Right? And actually, we need to do the same thing for the course list. Let's do that. List. And this is this will be export default and then course list. All right, excellent. So now from our whiteboard, right, we know that we can render everything. Right, here's the course editor. We can also certainly render everything else. You know, course list too. It didn't load it. Let's do an import course list from course list. There it is. I'm going to do the same thing with course grid from course grid. There it is. Right? And we're going to just display everything for now. So here's a course grid. There we go. So if we go to our whiteboard, we have everything. Oops, we don't have anything. What happened? npm start. Let's run it again. All right, so we have everything, right? We have the course grid, we have the course list, we have the course editor, everything's displayed. What we want to be able to do is instead navigate, right? Sometimes display the course grid, sometimes display the course list, sometimes display the course editor, right? Depending on what we click, Right? So to do that, let's go back to the whiteboard. Let's remove these cards for now. We don't need those for now. What we'd like to be able to do is create a whole bunch of routes. We'd like to be able to create a whole bunch of links that are going to say that we're going to create a link that says, I'm going to create a link that has a particular hyperlink, right? And I'm going to give it a name that looks very much like a path, all right? But it's more of a name than a path, right? It has a syntax of a path, right? But it's really more of a name, a unique name, right? So let's create a link, and link we need to import the link. So we need to import it. We'll import it from here. So link. It's also part of the React router DOM. We're also going to need the route as well. So let me load that as well. So link. I want to navigate either to the course list, and I can click on the list, or I can navigate to the grid. If I click on the grid, right? Or I can navigate to the editor, course editor, and this would be editor. Okay? All right, so if we do that, this renders as just plain old hyperlinks. There they are, just list, grid, or editor. Right? Okay? And what we'd like to be able to do is display one or another thing depending on which one I click. So let's do that. So instead of hard coding this content here, right, and say this is what I want to render always, instead I want this to be dynamic. Only if you click on certain links will I show this, that, or the other. Right? So to do that, it's the use of the route. Route says if the path in the hyperlink is so-and-so, display this component. Right? It creates a map that says, look at the URL. Depending on what the URL says, load this component or that component or the other component. Make sense? Notice that indeed, right here, if I click on these, notice that the hyperlink is changing at the top. See that? See the hyperlink is changing? But it's being ignored. See that? The browser is not paying attention to the URL changes. See that? Internally, JavaScript knows that it is changing. Right? And this whole mechanism is saying, hey, is there a route mapped to that? It didn't find any, so it's ignoring it. All right? Right? Only if there's a route that maps to whatever the URL says will it actually do something. Right? So let's do that. We're going to say, instead of having this course here, we're going to say this is going to be a route that if the path is / course grid, then the component that I'm going to render, right, is course grid. Right? And I'm going to change this. There we go, like that. So that's a little bit easier to read. And if I see a path that is says course list, then the component that we're going to render is course list, right? And here, if I see a route whose path is course editor, right, we're going to render this component, the course editor. That makes sense? Right? So now, going back, notice that it doesn't render any. Wait, what? All right, so course grid is rendering, but not the other ones. Why not? Route, path. Oh. I think I'm missing a slash in front of this, maybe? Okay, there we go. So list, grid, or editor. Notice that now I'm navigating. I have the same functionality of navigation, right, that I had before, where you navigate through a through using hyperlinks, right? But that navigation was very coarse, right? It threw away the entire page and then replaced it with a brand new page. This one gives you much more control, right? It could be that you only change a very small snippet of the page as opposed to rendering, re-rendering the entire page. Here we're just, for instance, just rendering the bottom half, right? We're leaving the first half at the top unchanged. It could be some headers, maybe we can have some left-hand side, maybe a footer. Those don't need to change, yeah, right? Instead, we only change what's inside, right? Depending on what you click, right? And so right now, so this is how you would create, for instance, the toggle that the assignment asks you to do, right? Then you would display either the grid one way or the list another way, right? Dynamically, and it would fetch the array for the courses and whatnot, right? And it would display one or the other, and depending on which course you click on, you would go and edit that course. Yes, right? Now, for instance, when we go to the editor, we should be able to say, well, which course do you want to edit? Ooh, I want to edit course 1, 2, 3. And then, well, I'll load course 1, 2, 3, and then you can edit the course 1, 2, 3 with its modules and lessons and whatnot, right? And then you can edit that course, right? We don't know how to do that just yet. That is the next section on how do you pass arguments, right? How do you pass an attribute so that whoever is rendering this knows what to render. Make sense? Right? And we'll do that next.